Thank you all. Appreciate it. Now, we have a fantastic panel coming up. I am only going to introduce our moderator, though, and get the panelists to introduce themselves. Tim Sparapani, a very good friend of ours at FOSI and of mine personally. He runs SPQR Strategies and is a much sought after, so make a line after this panel, much sought after consultant on a wide range of tech policy issues. He's held positions at the App Developers Association, at Facebook, and the ACLU. And I found out something about you, Tim. Washingtonian Magazine named him as one of their 40 under 40. Still under 40?
No.
Okay. And I wanted to let Debbie know 62 is only a number, okay? Just telling. And when asked to give career advice by The Bridge, in 3 words, he said, always add value. So I have no doubt he will do just that. Tim, please.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to FOSI. Every year I get the pleasure of doing a panel. I don't know why they keep asking me to come back. Although my age creeps up, they keep asking me to come back. So thank you to my friends at FOSI. I am such a fan of this organization. Those of you who've been here in the past know that every year I give a plug that say, if you're not a member of FOSI, I have to ask why not? Fix that today. These people do wonderful work and you should support their work. We're so glad you're here today. Second point today. Once in a while, as a moderator, you have the extraordinary pleasure of having people on stage who are the absolute cream of the crop. FOSI has done an amazing job of getting friends from Australia, Luxembourg, and India to fly in to participate. Far too often in the United States, in my opinion, this conversation is a completely Americentric conversation. Big tech companies are here, we talk about what happens in the United States, but we don't recognize that the bulk of the world's activity is the rest of the world's activity. So today, we have the real pleasure of having 3 of the world's finest experts on the question, and we're going to have a discussion this morning about how do we create a culture of social responsibility. So rather than spend more time talking right now, I'm going to begin and let the panelists do a brief introduction of themselves. Maybe we could just give your names and your titles very quickly, and then we'll go through and we're going to do a little bit of overview so that you understand the valuable work that's happening around the world. And then we're going to have a conversation about how do we create a culture of social responsibility. So please, Julie.
Right. Hi, my name is Julie Inman Grant. I'm the Australian eSafety Commissioner, and I'm sorry to inform you, you're not going to get an Australian accent, as I am American born. I spent about 20 years in the industry. In the early days with Stephen Balcom in the 1990s shaping the CDA. I moved with Microsoft to Australia 18 years ago and have never left. So I'll talk about our approach to online safety following these introductions.
Gail, please.
So my name's Gail Kent. I'm part of the European Commission, but I'm actually based in Luxembourg rather than in Brussels, because we do actually have staff in Luxembourg as well as Brussels, but although not so many. And I'm the director responsible for, my title is Data in the European Commission. I have several things within my directorate. One is to do with supporting the data economy in the digital single market. The second is the digital transformation of culture and educational institutions to exploit the potential of the European cultural heritage. And the third is a unit which looks at removing digital barriers of language and accessibility and promotes a better internet for children. So I'm really delighted to be here today. It's my first ever visit to Washington.
Okay.
Dr. Kumari, please.
Hi, I'm Ranjana Kumari. I'm from New Delhi, India. I am heading an institution, Center for Social Research, and my second hat is one of the largest advocacy body of women who work with India's parliament. I am chairperson for that. Also, we have, I sit on the safety advisory board of Facebook and Twitter. What we are doing back home is about reaching out to the young and the teen, about creating the counter-speech culture, also looking after the safety of the young ones. Though the debate is very nascent in India at the moment about children online, But for women online, we are working very hard for many years now, almost 2 decades now.
Great. So I've asked Julie to start us off and give us a brief overview of her work in Australia, and then we're going to go right down the line, and then we're going to begin our conversation.
Sure, and of course we're focused on how do we change the culture of responsibility online. And I'm going to start by saying I don't think we can measurably change the culture online until we change societal cultures and behaviors underlying what we see surfacing on the internet. And while many of us have been in this space for more than 20 years, a long time, we're probably at least 10 years behind globally in terms of doing the targeted audience-specific education that we need to do. So targeting, women have different issues, LGBTI, African American, Hispanic, seniors, young people, parents. There's a lot of fear and scaremongering that goes on that serves to panic parents rather than to empower parents. And so we try and take a very pragmatic approach. So one of the things that we're trying to do to change the online culture by also targeting the underlying behaviors and societal is, harkening back to the 90s again. You'll all recall the 3 R's of education that we grew up with: reading, writing, and arithmetic. We believe that the 4 new imperatives, the new 4 R's for the digital age, are respect, responsibility, resilience, and critical reasoning skills. We believe those are issues that should be practiced, instilled in young people and old, online and offline, transcend cultures. And we have to start, I'll start with governments and industry first, because if we're going to change the responsibility and the culture, we all have to play a role. And governments set the tone, leaders set the tone. And I think we've seen the policy pendulum shift in terms of how governments want to interact with industry. Some countries take a laissez-faire approach. Another want to kind of whack the industry on the head. I'd like to say that Australia takes a more, what we call a co-regulatory approach, a cooperative approach, because we're focused on harms minimization of our users. We were set up as a safety net. We have significant regulatory powers to find the social media sites, but in all 3 reporting queues we have a reporting queue for children that are seriously cyberbullied, and if they report to the social media site and it's not taken down, they can come to us. We can advocate on their behalf. And in all 1,000 cases, we've worked cooperatively with the social media sites to get the content taken down. We've never had to invoke those formal regulatory powers, because we have to remember that these companies, volumes are huge, context is missed, things fall through the cracks. That's why we were set up as a safety net, to help early intervention strategy to get the content taken down. We have a similar approach with image-based abuse, which is colloquially known as revenge porn. We don't call it revenge porn because it's sensationalistic and it leads to victim blaming and the already gender double standards that exist when a woman's nude is shown online versus a man's. And then of course, we also fight against child sexual exploitation material. So again, we believe rather than taking an adversarial approach, we take a cooperative approach in the first instance. All that being said, I believe that industry needs to change the culture of the internet by taking more responsibilities, not only to invest and innovate in technology, but to fundamentally change the way they design and deploy their products before going out to market. So we have started a safety by design consultation, working with companies, NGOs, parents, and young people themselves, companies large and small. We know that mature companies have been incorporating privacy by design and security by design for years. They need to extend that into safety by design, do the risk assessments up front, build the safety protections into the technologies before they deploy to market. Retroactively applying these safety protections after the damage and the harm has been done is no longer acceptable. Having the onus for safety to fall upon users and then law enforcement and governments is also no longer acceptable. There are tremendous best practices out there. That's what we plan to capture. It's principles-based. There'll be guidelines for young, small apps developers that don't have these kinds of resources. So again, let's be constructive about this, but let's accept that governments need to change. They need to change their approach, as does industry.
There's a lot to unpack there. We'll come back in a little while. Gail, please.
The same question? Or?
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the work
we do?
that you're doing at DG Connect?
Well, we have a multi-pronged strategy, so a little bit like you, we don't see that regulation is the solution to all ills. So we basically work in 4 ways: by funding, by hard law, by soft law, and by self-regulation. So we fund these Better Internet for Kids strategy, which is co-funded through the Connecting Europe facility. We fund a coordination at EU level with a core platform across the whole of Europe, and then the Safer Internet Centres, one Safer Internet Centre in every member state, national awareness centres, national helplines to support parents and children, which is the InSafe network, and then national hotlines for the takedown of child sexual abuse material, which is the InHope network. And a successful joint campaign is the Safer Internet Day, which I guess you all know, but which was actually started in Europe and is now celebrated in 140 countries. And then within that, we have campaigns this year. We've had the Safer Internet for EU campaign. Every year we pick a certain number of things to concentrate on. So this year it's been awareness raising on online safety, cyber hygiene, as we call it, and media literacy. Then we have the Alliance to Better Protect Minors Online, which is self-regulation. So that's where we have industry, civil society, and UNICEF who come together and have adopted actions in order to try and protect minors online. So they themselves run it with us doing the secretariat, if you like, and FOSI are members of that. We have the usual, I guess most of you have the hard law on online content. So we have the Child Sexual Abuse Directive for the prompt removal of CSAM hosted on national territory. We've just recently revised the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, which now has special provisions to protect minors from harmful content, including on video sharing platforms. And then the General Data Protection Regulation, which is specific protections for the use of personal data for children. But Peter Fatlnig will be talking about that in the next panel. And then we have soft law measures. So we have a code of conduct on countering illegal online hate speech. We have a communication on tackling online disinformation or so-called fake news. And we have a recommendation to tackle illegal content online. So we're sort of out there in all kinds of different areas. And for us, what's very important is that we work with all of the stakeholders, whether it be children. I think it's very important to include the children. I'm always kind of horrified how often I go to meetings where we discuss the children as if, and they're never there. So I'm really glad that today we've got some teenagers coming, because I think their point of view is just as valid as ours, and they also have rights, which I think sometimes we forget. And then we work with parents, teachers, the whole range.
Thank you. Dr. Kumari, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in India and your role at the center?
Well, I just want to take you to a different cultural, social context when we are talking about online safety issues for children, for women, and society at large. I think it's important to understand that India accepts technology very easily, and they're very happy about internet technology, and also we are every day increasing the number of people who have access. Almost 134 million children have the mobile and 40 million have internet access. But when you look at the other side, the whole issue of the literacy, whole issue of the awareness, and also to look at this as a problem is really at the moment at the very nascent stage, because a lot of people are not ready to accept children online and getting abused online. This is reflected in the way we are reporting our crime data. When you look at the NCRB data, which is National Crime Reports data, which records and reports the crime, you see that there is no space for cyberbullying reporting or any of these kind of child abuse online reporting possibility on the through the NCRB data. We have the latest report which came out just 2 years back, that is 2016, and some of the NGOs reported in 2017. 2016 was the UNICEF report, and then 2017 we have some NGOs reported about the issue of a lot of children getting abused, but there's no communication, and we are culturally very silent about such communication between children and parents. That's a very, very important bridge to be crossed when we are talking about the communications, especially in the context of culture of responsibility, where parents and children have to engage in more communication. Children should be free to report to the parents about what is their experience and what kind of a problem they are facing. Also, one of the biggest problematic that came out of the research that we learned, that there is hardly any communication between teachers and children. In fact, parents disallow such communication. And also in that sense, what kind of a role are we seeing for teachers in building this culture of responsibility? One very unfortunate part, and when Stephen was there, of course, this whole issue came much more in the forefront because a lot of reporting was happening during his visit about child abuse online, where the whole issue that government should get into evidence-based research. Many companies who are operating in India should really engage in evidence-based research because we are lacking in data and information about such issues. This is the most urgent intervention that we need to create a culture of responsibility, and that lies on the tech companies, on the government, as Julie said, for Australian context. But on the side of the society, we need to create more dialogue possibility and also awareness campaigns through the civil society organizations. As you know, in India, we have a lot of very active civil society and NGOs. If those can be involved, and giving example of our own work with tree surfing, which is a huge amount of success, and recently the CEO of Twitter was in India, Mr. Jack Dorsey, and we had extensive discussion with him on these issues. Also that our 100th tree surfer is Mr. Jack Dorsey himself, that we brought in the video online. And also with social surfing with support from Facebook, we have reached out to 22 states and 600 colleges in the country with 300,000 students. So it's a large number of people that we have covered through our programs. But that's not enough. That's not really what India is all about. It's multicultural. Diversity is the key to understand India, to make any kind of intervention in India. And especially in the context, the challenge is that there's a huge amount of trafficking in children that you see in India happening through online spaces, and especially for girls and boys equally. So this is something which needs to be looked at, and I think NECMEC was here. They visited India recently, and we had a big discussion about how to set up those systems. We do have online reporting possibility, but then in absence of laws which are really covering online, we are using the laws which are IPC, Indian Penal Code, which is the normal law of the land where we are. So there is not specific laws which are in place to cover these issues. So just to say how to create the culture of responsibility, I think it is to hold people accountable and to hold people responsible, and that is from parents, students, government and tech companies. And I think we should not ignore the law enforcement in the whole process, because law enforcement is something which needs to be educated equally. And if they don't know how to book the people, how to investigate, how to really bring these issues in the fore, then I think still there is a lot more needs to be done there in terms of educating the law enforcement about the kind of crime and kind of issues that are being faced by children online. And also most important thing in Indian context, to create that dialogue between parents and their children, and also teachers and students. That's the where I think we will be able to create a better culture of responsibility online.
Great, Dr. Kumari. I know Julie's going to want to jump in here. I want to push back a little bit. I've been doing this for 2 decades, and I have a desire to see the conversation evolve. at least in the United States, where I spend much of my time working for my clients, the conversation has begun and ended with dealing with horrific events that have a nexus somehow to technology or the internet. And it seems like the best aspiration we've had is to try to address not even the emerging crimes or challenges, but the ones that happened in the past. So I was particularly excited about this panel because I hope that we can go beyond talking about the horrific incidents and talk about culture. And so I'm going to ask the panel to talk a little bit about that and see if we can grow beyond just expecting that crimes are resolved that have some intersection with technology. Julie, I know you feel very strongly about this. You've been working on this for a while.
And, about what the responses are?
Yeah, and what in particular, what can we do to do cultural work?
Yep.
Recognizing Dr. Kumari's very important point about not having a monolithic culture, and you and I were having this conversation a little bit beforehand, that there is no such thing as a monolithic culture.
Right.
In any country, right?
Yeah.
But particularly in one as diverse as India, Australia, the United States, it's across Europe.
Yeah, well, I think some of the challenges that we've seen surfaced here today, there's a lot of global commonality in terms of the range of, say, online abuses that are being experienced, from gender-based abuse, which Ranjana and I have talked a lot about in the past, and we've tried to collaborate on cyberbullying, what we call adult cyber abuse, child sexual exploitation, trafficking, increasingly in the developing world. I mean, if you think about it, only 50% of the world is online. And the issues that we're seeing in the developed world, the connected world, are starting to diverge from what we're seeing in the developing world. And I'll give you an example.
Please.
I've got an investigative team, 8 investigators that look into child sexual abuse material, and we seek to disrupt the trade and sharing of images and issues. Pedophile sites are being flooded by what we call self-produced child sexual abuse material, and these are of kids 5 or 6. Sometimes they're coerced through online chat functions, or met on social media sites, or even teen-based dating sites. So we had one video of an 8-year-old girl emulating a sexual act with a foreign object in her bathroom, and we can hear the parents in the next room talking. So, we're letting, and so sometimes, as I said, this is for coercion. They're told to do it, but sometimes we found it's for likes and approbation, and the want to be liked. So we're seeing that in the developed world, whereas in the developing world that's coming online in countries that we work with in my region of the world, like the Philippines, if you come from an impoverished Philippine family, you have a 7 in 10 chance of being the victim of interfamilial child sexual abuse. And it's often family members or other intermediaries that are selling children's sex acts for they're creating cyber sex dens in these huge megacities where there aren't even addresses for NGOs or law enforcement to go save them, and they're being, sold for cyber sex by their families or other intermediaries, and the consumers tend to be overseas. So there are a list of horribles. And it's the enemy here is the child abuser. It isn't the technology itself.
That's an important point.
These are human behavioral and social issues that need to be tackled. But we all have a stake in trying to identify the issues, break down the barriers and silos, and collectively work together to solve the issues.
Gail, Dr. Kumari, it sounds like I'm being too ambitious and hoping we can evolve beyond a discussion about victimization. Perhaps you could respond.
So one of the things I find a bit difficult is that we come to these events, and you would think only bad things happen on the internet. In fact, you'd think our children are all complete nuts, because why are they actually on the internet all the time when only bad things happen there? But when you're actually sitting with the youth panel in front of you, they will tell you how wonderful the internet is and the amazing things they've done on it and the campaigns they've been involved in and the way they've found people like them on the internet and the way they've been able to interconnect with the members of the family they want to interconnect with, or of course they don't always want to interconnect. So, I mean, there's a huge amount of potential and good things on the internet, and one of the things we try to do in our Safer Internet centres is to look at that side of it, the positive side of the internet. How can they get the most out of it? How can they, as you say, the words you use, resilience and respect and everything, as long as you've set up those things, and as long as you're working with the children on those things, then there's an enormous amount of potential. And I think we don't concentrate enough on that side of it because we just focus in on the bad side. So that's my point of view.
Dr. Kumari, if I could, we only have a few minutes, unfortunately, because we're going to get us all back on schedule. The work that you all have done obviously touches on the particular issue of half of society by gender. And you all have been eloquent and outspoken and forceful regarding the particular needs of creating space online for women and girls. And Dr. Kumari, it's defined much of your work. I'd love to have the whole panel talk particularly about what we can do to advance culture of responsibility with respect to women and girls.
Well, I think in spite of a great gender divide online, because we have only 29% women online using the internet,
just
the men, just at the moment. So it's a really huge gender divide that a lot of women, because of course there are many reasons. One, that even if they have smartphone, they don't know how to use it. Also, if a lot of parents are watching their daughters and their girls not going online, they just, and many girls have to impersonate in the sense that they have to put their brother's picture to be online, to be safe, in India especially. So I think that's something very important. But then on the other side, as you very rightly said, that we have run huge amount of campaigns in India, and recent campaigns we have been having one after the other victory. For example, this whole 377 hashtag, which is for LGBTQ rights. And then we have had the right to pray, where women were not allowed to enter certain kinds of temples in India. And the whole campaign online has been so strong and so powerful in terms of sending messages and connecting women together and women's groups together, that we have managed to get a lot of women come together and protest collectively. They've come on street because of that. And I think if you remember a long time back when 2012, we had this huge issue of the rape case that happened, and that was the time when every woman in the country who's using the technology, who has the fortunate opportunity to use the technology, has been able to get on to this whole mobilization campaign. Happy to Bleed campaign, for example. Nobody would ever talk about menstruating women in India, and nobody will talk about the problems connected. And you must be shocked when I say these things, because this is so culturally rooted in Indian context that these kind of issues emerge. And a lot of women did not have the safe way of protecting themselves during the periods, and they really managed to bring this campaign. So a lot of these issues have been, women are communicating with each other, connecting with each other, and also mobilizing for change. So I think this is something which is the positive side of the use of the internet technology, but at the same time the challenges we should not ignore, because that's the part of responsibility, culture of responsibility, that we are able to meet the challenges and face the challenges and make them opportunities for our people at large.
Gail, Julie, please.
Within the Safer Internet Centres, we don't really make a distinction between boys and girls. And I think you have to remember where we are in Europe as well. You know, there are 27 countries, and if we all start saying, well, the Italians are good at cooking and the Germans don't have a sense of humour, and which are all rubbish, frankly. And also, I don't like to say the girls do one thing and the boys do another thing. By observation, we notice that boys and girls do different things on the web, and we also notice, and we have individual country Safer Internet Centres, so they're working more with individuals as well as with groups, and of course then we try and focus our work on the individuals. In the kind of wider field of women in digital, then there's a lot going on in the European Commission, you know, the Coding Week, Startup Europe, prizes for women innovators, Digital Skills Awards with a special category for women, girls in ICT, and things like that. But I wouldn't say we distinguish in the Same for Internet campaign itself.
I would say I would start with the premise that technology and social media has been incredibly democratizing for women. It's leveled the playing field. It has given women a voice. We want to enhance the ability for women, and it's intersectional, of course, and other voices that haven't had equal share of space to be promoted, to be able to sing, to be able to cut through. But we don't treat women as a singular category. In fact, we have two different programs where we actually target women who are experiencing gender-based abuse from two different ends of the spectrum. So the first is a program called eSafety Women, because we know that women who are victims of family and domestic violence, in 98% of cases, the current or former partner will use technology-facilitated abuse as a way to continue to coerce, control, harass, surveil, and humiliate. So we've trained over 6,000 what we call domestic frontline workers to help women use technology safely and as a tool of empowerment. Most of the online abuse is low tech, through text messages, though we've had cases of drones flying over safe houses after a woman has escaped interstate. On the other end of the spectrum, we know that gendered abuse happens to women with public profiles, with opinions, journalists, feminists, political people in political roles, and it tends to be gendered, sexualized, violent. And so we have a program called Women Influencing Technology Spaces, or Women with Wits, to help empower them to build their psychological armor, support each other, but use tools and strategies to be able to read. You need to be able to read the tweet and the vitriol behind it to see if there's a real threat and respond accordingly, right?
I think so. What I also think is that Stephen has stood up and given me the sign that unfortunately we're out of time. I would love to continue this conversation. All three of our experts are going to be here throughout the day. I hope you'll avail yourself of the opportunity to talk to them. I hope you'll also join me in thanking them for sharing their opinions about culture and how we can be more responsible on that.